are at the top of the hour. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. If we haven't met before, my name is Laura Nelson. I'm an MBA admissions consultant with Target Test Prep, and I am excited to bring you the conclusion of this series. So if you've been following along with us for the past 4 months, you may be acquainted already with this Mapping Out Your MBA Admissions Journey series. So it's the last part, and I'm going to talk through the conclusion of the key components of the MBA application process, including what you can be doing now, key milestones to reach in the next few weeks, and how you can effectively position yourself for your target MBA programs. So some of you may be wondering, is this session going to be recorded? Yes, it will be. It will be sent to you and it will be also available on our YouTube channel. So a couple housekeeping items. Feel free to use the chat at any point during this webinar. I will try my best to follow that and answer questions as I can as we go along. But also, we will be doing Q&A at the end. So if for any reason I miss your question, feel free to ask it again, and I will get to as many as I can at the conclusion of this presentation. So before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Laura Nelson. I have a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University, where I studied art. And I'm also a full-time MBA graduate of the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. I was a member of the admissions committee there. And before business school, I worked in film and television. So I had a very non-linear path going into business school and coming out of school. Following graduation, I entered the tech industry, where I worked over a decade in general management roles and was most recently a VP of marketing at a software startup. My last 2 companies exited through acquisition. Importantly, I've been an MBA admissions consultant for 15 years with 2 of the top consulting firms and now with Target Test Prep. I've steered hundreds of MBA clients into top programs, and I'm a member of AGAC, which gives me direct access to admissions committees at top MBA programs. So over the course of these 15 years, I've worked on almost every program imaginable, including full-time, part-time, online, executive, and dual degree applications at top programs like these on the slide, along with many others that are not on this list. So now that you've learned a little more about me, I'd love to learn more about who is on the call today. So in the chat, could you share whether you're applying to an MBA program this year, and if so, what round, and maybe one of your target MBA programs too? It'd be great to see, where people are in the process and where they're aiming for. So again, which round are you applying in if you're applying this year, and which programs are you targeting? All right, so you've got a round 2, aiming for Kellogg, Sloan, Ross. Great. Your timing is great if you are just getting started with the process. See another round 2, great. Applying round 1 next year, targeting CBS, HBS, Wharton, great. See another round 2, possibly round 3. Don't recommend round 3, but hopefully you can pull things together in the next few months. Another round 1, great. That's for this year, so you got a few weeks. Next year, first round, Duke, NYU, Georgia Tech, great. Awesome. So we've got a mix of people who are applying this year and next year. And that's totally fine. Wherever you are in the process, you are here to learn, right? So my job is to hopefully impart some information that is helpful for you in the near term and gives you food for thought if you are applying, in subsequent years. So if you've seen some of the series, this might be repeat of information, but if you haven't, this is what this 4-part series is designed to do. So we help you map out your progress to complete your applications. I designed this to meet round 1, but you can use this template to meet round 2, or even map to next year. You can, obviously pace these activities as you need to, but hopefully, the content and the information is useful for you. So if you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, check out our YouTube channel and make sure you find them. So let's get started. I like to use this visual of a road, especially a curvy one like this, because the MBA application process, it's long, it's daunting, it's complex, and the road to submitting your application is anything but straight. This is a really tough process to face alone, and I wouldn't recommend it. That's because the highly competitive MBA process requires a lot of introspection. It requires reflection, it requires communication, and it requires a high degree of EQ, among other things. So my job here today is to break it down into smaller pieces for you and hopefully make the process easier for you to tackle. So with that in mind, let's dive into today's agenda. Here are the things that I plan to cover. So first, I'm going to cover the key milestones in the application journey. Where are we in part 4 of 4? If you're applying in round 1, what are the key activities you should be doing now? And again, no matter where you are in the journey, this is something useful as you think about those last few weeks before you submit your applications. Next, I'm going to detail some common mistakes I see in MBA applications. As I've mentioned, I've been doing this for 15 years and also saw common mistakes in my time in admissions at Ross. Then I'm going to cover the importance of your short answers, your optional questions, and your video questions. These are often overlooked by candidates, but they do require your time and attention. We will then cover a pre-application submission checklist. And then finally, as I mentioned, I'm going to leave time at the end for your questions. So again, I'll keep an eye on the chat. If I miss your question, just include it at the end and I'll give as much time to that as I can. So first, let's just cap off on those milestones. If you have not seen parts 1 through 3, again, check out the YouTube channel. This is the content that it covers. Today, we're going to be focusing on those activities in the yellow box, and hopefully they're not a surprise because I did go through the agenda on the last slide. So let's dive first into those common mistakes in MBA applications. I've grouped these 10 mistakes across some of the major application materials, and I really want to encourage you not to fall into these traps. You'll be in a much stronger position with your MBA applications if you're aware of these mistakes and just proactively trying to avoid them. So if you are applying in round 1 this year and you are making finishing touches on your applications, these tips are going to really come in handy. If you're applying in round 2 and just getting started, these are things to watch out for as you work through the process. So the first 2 big mistakes that I see on MBA applications concern your resume. And I'm going to go over 2 big mistakes that I see in your resume. First, starting with what is covered in your resume. So the first mistake is that your resume details your day-to-day job responsibilities rather than your professional achievements. However, the MBA resume is different than your current job search resume. For the MBA application, you really need to showcase where you've driven impact professionally and quantify this impact using metrics wherever possible. I will say if you don't have metrics, that's okay. Either an approximation or a description of the result is just fine. You want to make sure that you are leading the admissions committee toward an outcome that helps them understand where you've made an impact professionally. I want to make sure you don't forget any initiatives where you've stepped outside of your day-to-day role and made a difference in your organization. So this can include employee resource groups, special projects, and other committees like a social committee. So showcase when you've taken initiative and been a leader, whether you've been in a formal leadership position or otherwise. That's mistake number one. The second mistake I see in MBA resumes deals more with execution. Some of them are hard to read. I really don't recommend that you go below a 10 or 11 point font. And also consider how you talk about your achievements. Keep in mind your audience. Sometimes I see too much industry jargon, for example, and you have to know that the MBA Admissions Committee is well-rounded, but it's not necessarily comprised of experts in your particular field. So if your resume has a ton of abbreviations, industry terms, and more, it's likely that your resume is going to be difficult to understand. So take a step back, describe some of your achievements using layman's terms. And this is not to say I want you to dumb it down. No, I want you to ensure that the reader from another industry is going to understand what you're saying and, importantly, understand that impact you're trying to describe. So this is where an admissions consultant can really come in handy to make sure that your resume is written for the right audience. And in this case, it is the MBA Admissions Committee. So that covers off the resume. The next two I want to talk about are with your short answers and your essays. So the third biggest mistake relates to how a candidate articulates his or her post-MBA career goals. It is a huge mistake if your career goals are vague or unrealistic. So MBA admissions committees, they ask about your career goals in your short answer and essay questions because they want to set you up for success after you graduate from the program. So after all, the goal is to get a job, whether you're seeking an MBA to accelerate your career or switch into a new one. And I know there are some cases where candidates are starting businesses or returning to a company, but I'm going to speak to the majority here. So if your career goals are vague or they're unrealistic, the admissions committee will question whether you've done the right prep for the MBA, and your overall application just won't build confidence otherwise. So make sure those career goals are specific and realistic. So here's an example of a non-specific goal, and that is just, I want to go into finance. So the problem with this goal is that finance is a broad industry. So as an admissions consultant, I'd really push you to get specific. Do you want to go into investment banking? Do you want to go into private equity? Do you want to go into asset management? Do you want to go into corporate finance? As a candidate, you really need to get specific with the area of finance you want to pursue and name a couple target companies. So an example of an unrealistic goal is expecting to transition from being an artist to an investment banker without any real track record in quantitative subjects. So make sure that some elements of your past career will transfer to your new career. So that covers off like vague goals and unrealistic goals. The next mistake I see across short answers and or essays, it really depends on the program's applications, but it is the failure to show your fit with the MBA program you're applying to. So some programs, they ask very specific questions about why you want to attend that program and how the program will progress your professional and your personal and your developmental goals. So often, MBA programs will ask what you intend to contribute to the cohort too. It's critical that you understand each MBA program and its unique value proposition, including their academic offerings, their initiatives, and their unique cultures, and tailor your response accordingly. So your answer for this, for a program like Wharton, will be different than it would be for a program like Haas. So here you really have to do your homework and make sure your responses are tailored to that program and that program only. This is not a case where you're going to be cutting and pasting across different why this school essays, for multiple programs. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go into the next two common mistakes, and they concern test scores and transcripts. So the first one, let's talk about test scores. Mistake number 5 concerns your test score and its alignment to the MBA program you're applying to. So if you haven't dug into this already, definitely check out the most recent class profile for your target programs and understand the average, the range, the 80% range. They don't all report in the same way, but I think it's really helpful if you see a total range. Some programs report that way. And if you're looking at a total range of scores and your score is lower than the accepted range from the prior year's class, you are most likely shooting yourself in the foot for that program. You're making it difficult to gain admissions. So make sure that you're doing everything you can to maximize your chance of getting your best score. That may require, taking the test again or taking another exam. And I do want to address this topic. On the topic of exams, I get this question a lot about the GMAT specifically, because there is a perception out there that the GMAT is the most important test. So I want to debunk that right now. You do not need to take the GMAT to gain admission to business school. So most programs accept the GRE, which may be better suited to your current knowledge. And some programs accept the EA or the executive assessment. So I recommend that you take the test that suits your abilities and take it more than once if you have to score within the accepted range of your target program, right? So compare that versus the class profile. And if it's a high, if the program is high on your list, you want to give yourself the best opportunity to get in. I will caveat that by saying that a great score, it's not going to get you in, guarantee admission, but it's not going to keep you out of the running for that MBA program. So that's a little bit about test scores and a mistake that I see. I want to touch on GPA, which is in a kind of similar category. And mistake number 6 is failing to address a low GPA or poor grades in your academic record. So while you cannot rewrite the past or rewrite your transcript, it is possible to overcome these issues if you provide context for your academic record in your application. So for example, if you had personal setbacks during your undergrad experience, I would recommend providing some details about your situation somewhere. This is likely in your optional essay. If your weak performance was in quant-related courses and you haven't done much in this area since, you might consider taking a quant-based course like stats, econ, accounting, and getting an A, or check out MBA math. You need to remember that as much as the MBA experience is about professional development and getting a great job, it's also an academic degree. So the MBA Admissions Committee wants to understand that you can handle the curriculum of the program. And by providing more information in your application, you can help to instill confidence in your capabilities. So that's test scores and GPAs and transcripts. Let's shift gears a little bit to recommendations. So mistake number 7 here relates to your selection of recommenders. Don't choose the wrong ones. If you choose someone who isn't your immediate supervisor and that's what the application asks for, make sure that you tell the admissions committee why. Okay. Mistake number 8, a little more nuanced, right? This is about the content that they provide. And sometimes I see that it is very generic, non-specific feedback. This is often the case when your recommender doesn't know you well or maybe hasn't directly supervised you in a professional setting. And some MBA candidates have the impression that a recommendation will be more effective if it comes from a CEO or someone in your organization with the big title. If that person happens to be your direct supervisor, that's totally fine. However, if the person with the big title and is a few steps removed from your daily contributions, your recommendation will probably be a little more generic, a little more vague, and less helpful to the MBA admissions committee and your candidacy overall. The admissions committee specifically asks for feedback from your direct supervisor so that they can understand the nuances of your performance and how it compares to that of your peers and how you respond to feedback, along with your professional potential, among other things. So getting the recommender right is super important. I do want to touch, though, on recommendations overall. I know from experience that this process can cause a lot of anxiety for candidates, and I understand this. This is a part of the process that feels out of your control, but you have a little more control in this process than you may think. And this is where you need to follow explicit instructions provided in the application regarding first the selection of your recommender. And additionally, you can also play a proactive role, right? And what I mean by that is you can set your recommender up for success by sharing your motivations for pursuing an MBA, by providing examples of certain situations where you have excelled or exceeded the performance of your teammates or responded to critical feedback. With this, I am not suggesting that you write the recommendation. It can and should come from your recommender, but I think there are ways that you can proactively take charge in the process and also, alleviate some of the stress and anxiety that comes from entrusting this part of your application to another individual. So that covers recommendations. The last two mistakes that I see on MBA applications are kind of overall mistakes. So I kind of put them in this catch-all category. And mistake number 9 is it's just a failure to answer the right questions, either in essays or, it can happen in short answers as well. So for example, some short answers in essays prompts ask candidates more than one thing. Sometimes candidates have blinders on and they're in a rush, and sometimes they glaze over the full question. So if a question asks about your short-term and long-term goals, be sure to provide the admissions committee with the full picture. Another example, if the question asks what you hope to get out of the program and what you can intend to contribute, make sure that you address both parts and do not skimp on that last part, the contribution. I don't want to see that in the concluding sentence. There are a lot of opportunities to overlook what you're being asked in these complicated applications. And the number one reason that people fail to answer the right question is because they're rushing, they're submitting at the last minute. So I highly recommend that you give yourself and your candidacy the best shot and allocate plenty of time for this process so that you can avoid these easy mistakes. And finally, let's touch on mistake number 10. I see it all the time in MBA applications, and it is just poor grammar and spelling mistakes, which can all be simply avoided by proofreading your application materials more than once. Again, these are caused when applicants are rushing, submitting at the last minute. And of course, you've got to keep in mind that the MBA is a huge investment of time, money, and resources. And these mistakes are easy to avoid if you're putting the diligence into the process that it deserves. Because these are mistakes that you don't want professors or recruiters to see once you're an MBA student. So Be sure to start your process off correctly and put your best foot forward. So that's it for the 10 biggest mistakes. And I hope these were helpful to you and your MBA application process. So next, we're going to hone in on a few sometimes overlooked aspects of the MBA application, and that's the short answers, optional essay, and the video questions. Some candidates leave these to the last minute, but I do think that they demand more attention and planning. So let's walk through them one by one, starting with the short answers. And these are important because they often help to set the stage for MBA admissions committees. Many people read the data forms first, that is the quick information that you're providing in your application, and they give the reader a brief understanding of who you are, where you're coming from, what you're trying to do. And, some of these applications are a bit more extensive than others. So it's not something you can expect to fill out in 5 or 10 minutes. With that said, I do have a recommended approach that involves using clear and concise language. You're going to be providing information about past experiences, your activities, extracurriculars, your goals, etc. And often the word count or the character count is pretty brief here. So it's unlikely to be a time where you're going to be very creative or flowery in your language. I want to leave you with a pro tip here because, a lot of people get frustrated that they're asking what appear to be similar questions from their resume on the data form. And, my recommendation here is not to copy and paste the resume bullet points into your work experience section. So use your resume again to detail achievements, as we talked about a few slides ago. And the short answer section here, with your professional experience history, will share day-to-day responsibilities, some context about the stakeholders you work with, and other information that might not have made it onto your resume. So that's my spiel on short answers. Optional questions. Now, this is a little more nuanced depending on a candidate's situation and a great opportunity to proactively address perceived weaknesses in your candidacy, right? The admissions committee is giving you this opportunity to use this space and discuss what might not have been shared elsewhere. So I recommend that you follow specific instructions provided by the prompt. What's really important to know here, this is not an opportunity just to tell another story, right? It is hugely tempting for candidates just to plop in another essay that they like, that they wrote for another program's application. So I don't recommend that you do that. Admissions committees know it is lazy. You want to instead follow the question again and make sure that information is necessary and it's relevant to your candidacy. So I mentioned a minute ago, this is a great opportunity to proactively address weaknesses in your profile, such as a low GPA, a low test score, and provide context for this situation, especially as I talked about, maybe you're dealing with a personal situation in undergrad that had an effect on your grades. You can also point to other examples that demonstrate your strengths in that area. So that's the optional section, and it is very personalized depending on your particular situation and where you may need to provide further information about your MBA candidacy. The last one is video questions. So some programs have spontaneous video questions to answer. Some require you to film and upload something to YouTube. For this section, I'm really focusing on the questions where you might have just like 30 seconds to a minute or so to prepare your response. And this gives some candidates anxiety, and they don't like the fact that it is more spontaneous. But it is important to admissions committees. Like, they really want to get to know you as a person and enable you to showcase your communication skills, how you speak in a conversation, right? And how you share various aspects of your personality. If the video portion gives you stress, I highly recommend that you practice. You can record yourself. You can practice in front of a mirror. And when it comes time to record, you just have to relax and be yourself. And I know it is easier said than done, but even by practicing and recording yourself a little bit, you'll be able to notice certain things that you do. Maybe you have a verbal tick, maybe you are inserting when you are unsure of what to say next. And even just catching those little things as you practice will put you off on a better foot once you record these videos. I will leave you with this pro tip. MBA admissions committees know when candidates are cheating on this video portion, so avoid this temptation. They can tell when you're looking up an answer, and they can also tell when you are reading an answer off your screen. Eyes tend to go across the screen rather. MBA admissions committees, they're not looking for perfection in these videos, and everyone else is starting off on the same foot. So you have to remember that. My recommendation is just stay in the moment, do your best, and remember that, everyone is starting from the same place. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this high-level checklist, and then we will transition to Q&A. So in this last section here, it is, I'm going to run through our application pre-submission checklist. There are 5 major steps here that I recommend you go through before hitting submit on your application. There is nothing worse than seeing a huge typo in your application proof after it was submitted. So hopefully steps like these can help you ward off those challenges. I had a candidate last year who spelled her name wrong on her resume, and she was rushing, she was changing things at the last minute, and that's the type of thing that you don't want the admissions committee to see. So first thing is to proofread the full application with fresh eyes. That means you're going to have to finish your application before the day that it is due. But there are advantages to this. This gives you the opportunity to revisit everything you said, ensure that your grammar, your spelling, and the other mistakes I mentioned are avoided and fixed before you hit submit. I think it's really hard to, read something and feel confident about it while I'm tired, while I'm rushing. So if you give yourself a buffer day or two, you can complete this step. Next thing I think is really important, and I know it sounds incredibly cheesy, but read your essays out loud. The admissions committees really want to hear how you communicate in the written word, verbally, on a day-to-day basis. And by reading something out loud, you can more effectively identify verbiage and phrasing that doesn't make a lot of sense, and other things that might come off awkwardly. I think this is important also because a lot of people, including MBA admissions committees, read things in their head, read things to themselves when they're reading your essays. So if it sounds really awkward when you read something out loud to yourself, it's also going to be awkward for the person reading your essays on the other end. So give your essays a read out loud and see if they sound and feel the right way to you after that exercise. Next, I want you to confirm that your recommendations were received. First, confirm that your recommender or recommenders have submitted them. They'll probably give you the heads up, but if not, you can just double check with them. You may already have received confirmation from the programs or in the portal, So that's great too if your recommender doesn't proactively tell you this. The risk here is that if your recommendation wasn't received by the program, then your application can be pushed into a future round. So you don't want all of that work for nothing. Make sure that this piece is completed in time and ensures that you can submit your application for your target round. Next one, I think, is really important too. Review your social media accounts and make sure there is nothing crazy on here that you don't want the admissions committee to see. So social media is fair game, especially on LinkedIn. So as you review your LinkedIn profile, make sure that your professional experience section tells the same story. I think it's also helpful to Google yourself and make sure that you take control of what you can here. If there are egregious posts from your social media accounts or elsewhere, admissions might find them as part of this process, or certainly when they do a background check and, once your offer of admission is accepted. So, ward off any issues now. This only becomes an issue in extreme cases, but I have seen this become issue for problematic candidates. Last thing, get a second opinion on your application. You can do this a couple different ways, right? You can enlist a friend or family member to review your application to ensure that your stories come across in a logical and authentic way. One thing I will caution here is that if your reader isn't well-versed in the MBA admissions process, I wouldn't let them derail your entire application. So direct that person to check for logic, flow, grammar, things like that. Another second opinion you can get is by enlisting one of Target Test Prep's experienced admissions consultants. We can give your application a read, provide detailed feedback. And if you are applying for round one this year, you still have time for this. So if you are thinking about it, definitely take action soon. Either course of action here, you're going to help your readers rather are going to help you find errors, help avoid common mistakes that are reviewed, and help you put your best foot forward in this process. So that is the high level pre-submission checklist. Now I'm going to shift to Q&A, but before I do that, I just want to make sure that you have the full knowledge of the suite of Target Test Prep's products and services. If you didn't know this already, you can try us for 5 days for free. This is available not just for the GMAT, but across the GRE and the EA. Next, and more related to MBA admissions, is you can avail yourself of a free consultation so that we can talk one-on-one about your application strategy. So my consultations generally run longer than 15 minutes, and this provides you with some insight on how you can optimize your chances in the admissions process. If you decide that you want to work together, we have 2 modes of doing that. We have comprehensive packages, which includes all of the activities you see on the left side here. It's truly an end-to-end offering and leaves no stone unturned in your process. And the time we spend together on reviews, phone calls, etc., is unlimited. We also have a la carte options available if you have targeted needs across your resume, your essays, your interview, and more. So with that in mind, use the chat feature to ask questions, and I will get to as many as possible. So I've got the link to the consultation here. You can also use the QR code, but I'll just leave this on the screen as I take your questions, and yeah, I'll give you a moment to type those in. A good question here about employment. So this person is asking, what is my opinion on being unemployed counting against this person's candidacy for MBA programs. For context, this has been more than 3 months. Doesn't make the application weaker. I would say in past years pre-COVID, absolutely this was the kiss of death, and I'm being dramatic here, but it was very difficult to gain admission to a top program without having a job. I do think, though, that COVID and the general dynamics of the job market have really created, wreaked havoc in people's lives and really made it difficult for, them to find new work quickly. We're seeing that in the tech industry now, but, these things are cyclical, right? It might be another industry in a couple of years. So all of that to say, like, it really depends on what you have been doing with your time. If you have been continuing to grow your skills, network, taking up your hobbies, things like that, and you can speak to them in the application, it is not the end of the world. You probably hear admissions committees say that they take a holistic view of your candidacy, and they're looking at what you have achieved to date professionally, right? So if you have a strong professional track record to date, the last few months may not matter so much. And of course, I don't have all of the details about your particular situation, but those are just some general high-level thoughts. And of course, if you want to talk about that further, I'm happy to. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, that was a good one for sure. Quiet group tonight. Well, I will leave this open for just a minute longer. If something comes to mind, you want to chat it here, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I hope you got some value out of this session. If you want to talk one-on-one more about your situation, again, the link to QR code are here. Be happy to discuss your profile and your particular application strategy. Hope this was helpful and hope that you have a great rest of your night.